Hello, this is Mrs. Smeckens, and in this lesson series, we're learning all about tracking a character, how to go back into a text and look across the whole thing, beginning, middle, and end, and collect every detail we can about one single character. And we're doing this because authors develop characters. They sprinkle lots of little details all throughout the text to help the reader better understand the character, better appreciate characters. Well, when we're doing this and authors sprinkle these details in, nothing is by accident. If the author put a detail in there, he wanted you to notice, and there's a reason for it. When we're tracking character details, so far we've learned that we want to look at, well, what did the character do in the story? What did he do in the beginning? What did he do in the middle? What did he do at the end? What were his actions? What were his choices? What were his reactions? And so we really collected that as we looked at the passage Charles. Remember that from the previous lesson? Did you find out a lot about Charles? You know who Charles is, don't you? Charles is Lori. If you didn't pick up on that, you might want to reread. Okay, I'll come back to that on another day. All right, so we read this 2-page story about Charles, and your task was to collect all of the details about the mom. All of the details from beginning, middle, and end about Lori's mom. Tell me everything she did. Okay, well, if you did that, you might have thought maybe you were doing it wrong. Because I'm going to guess you didn't have a whole lot of details. I didn't. I did it. This is it. And these are the only action details that the mom did. Because sometimes in stories, the character doesn't do much. They're not physically active. They don't make big decisions. They're just there. And so there's not a whole lot to track. So if we look back at the mom details you may have tracked from the previous lesson, this is all I had. I only had that one thing she did was she asked her question again because Lori didn't answer. She waited on the steps. She stayed at home with the baby. She went to the meeting. She sat restlessly at the meeting, and she smiled at the teacher. Okay, that doesn't tell me a whole lot about the character of the mom. But I know the author developed her. He just did it with different kinds of details. There are 3 kinds of details that authors use, sprinkle throughout their story that readers should notice. And we've only talked about the one, and that is, well, tell me everything the character did. Well, the mom didn't do much. So we better start looking at some of the other details. And the next one I want to talk about is, well, let's really look at what the character said. And in this story, the mom does a lot of talking. She says a lot. And we can learn a lot about the mom because of what she says. So readers don't just track what a character does. They also collect every detail they can, all the details they can about what a character says. Now, it's not just what they said. You know, you're thinking dialogue, right? Punctuation, quotation marks, and dialogue. It's not just what the character said. Sometimes it's just outside the quotation marks. It's how they said it. It's that she said it in a whisper. See, that doesn't just tell you what she said. It tells you she was saying it quietly, like secretly. Or if it says that she said it while screaming. Okay, well then you know a little bit about how she's feeling about this. You want to look at not just what they said, but how they said it. Did they say it sarcastically? That kind of thing. Because again, authors give you those details and nothing is by accident. He wanted you to know a little bit more about this character based on what the character said and how the character said it. Okay, now, before I show you some examples, let me also point out that sometimes we can collect more details about a character and what they say, but it didn't come in dialogue. It didn't come in quotation marks. It came in just narration, where it might just say the two kids huddled in the corner whispering about their secret plan. Okay, so they were talking. I have another talking detail. I have her talking, or him talking, or in this case, those boys talking. So I have a said detail. I just don't have it in quotes. That's okay, because a lot of times it's just going to be a narration. So I can still take notes, though. Talked, secretly, whispered, in corner. See, it tells me a little more about the character. So it doesn't have to actually be dialogue with quotation marks. It might just be narrated information. It talks about what she said or how she said something, but we don't have the exact words. Both of those we could absolutely collect as details, track to learn a little more. As I'm adding this up here, let me also point out that speech bubbles, like in graphic novels or comic strips, or if you're reading a picture book, any speech bubble would also tell you a little bit more about what the character said and even how the character said it. Okay, so I'd like to go back to that passage of on Charles, that text we read in the previous lesson. Actually, we just read parts of it, but I want to go back now and show you what I mean by collecting details about what the mom says. I already have details from what the mom did, actions, but I don't have any details on what she said. And it's probably good we're adding some details about what she said, because she didn't do a whole lot. And so this is normal. It's the combination of details that we're after. Okay, so I'm going to take what I have so far in terms of her actions, and now I'm going to just read some excerpts and really show you how I think about and notice what she said. Okay, remember, we're using our reading voice because these spoken details all come from the reading voice. And, well, what do they mean? What am I thinking they mean? What do they tell me about her? We're trying to figure out a little more about characters. Okay, that's why we're tracking them. Okay, so I've got an excerpt from the second chunk. Remember, it was broken in 5 chunks. This is the second chunk. It's just an excerpt. Okay, so the next day, Lori remarked at lunch, as soon as he sat down, Charles was bad again. He hit the teacher, and, then the mom was like, good heavens, I suppose he got spanked again. And so wait a minute, this is in the second chunk. And so now I can write down she says. So instead of do, I'll write say, okay, because she said this. She said, good heavens, I suppose he got spanked. Now, I'm not going to write all that. I'm just going to write good heavens, spanked. I know what I mean. Remember, we're taking notes here, okay? And I'll put it in quotes because it came from the text. That was my reading voice. But again, don't just write that down. Think about it. What does that tell you about the mom? She said, good heavens, I suppose he got spanked again. So what does that tell you about her? Yeah, she's concerned. She's like, what is up with this kid? She's a little appalled. Okay, so I'm learning a little more about her. Remember, I put appalled or concerned or whatever in parentheses, okay, because that's my thinking voice. All right, let's keep going. And I'm only collecting details about the mom and what she said. Lori said, hey, Dad, look up. And Dad said, what? And Lori said, look down. Look at my thumb. Gee, you're dumb. He began to laugh insanely. And then the mom said, why did Charles hit the teacher? I asked quickly. Okay, so this idea of why did Charles hit the teacher? She's asking, she wants to know why he hit the teacher. Okay, and I could write that down. But sometimes the most helpful information about learning about a character comes outside the dialogue. She said it quickly. Quickly. She didn't just ask it, she asked it quickly. Why would she ask it quickly? Look before it. Lori is doing kind of a dumb joke to his dad. It's kind of rude. It's definitely disrespectful. And the mom says, why did Charles hit the teacher? Quickly. She quickly asked that question. I'm going to make note that she quickly asked that question, and I'm going to write say because she's saying it, all right? And I this idea that it was said quickly, and then parentheses, what that tells me is she's trying to change the subject so that the dad doesn't get mad. Like, he's got to be thinking that joke was dumb and kind of rude, disrespectful, and she's quickly trying to change the subject. So I'm going to put here change subject. She's trying to change the subject. Okay, see how I learned a little bit about her? Not just in what was said, but it also in how it was said. Okay, help me with this next one. Well, this is like a little bit later, the third chunk of the story. Okay, he comes home from school, he climbs down from his chair. They had the exercise teacher there, and they learned how to touch their toes. And so he got down, squatted down, touched his toes, and said, like this. And he got solemnly back into his chair and picked up his fork and then said, Charles didn't even do exercises. Okay, but remember, we're tracking details about the mom. And in red is what the mom said. That's fine, I said heartily. Didn't Charles want to do exercises? Okay, I could have made that all red, but I want to just focus in on, that's fine, I said heartily. I is the mom. Okay. What does this tell me about the mom? Well, first off, what is she talking about? You've got to kind of think through that piece. So Charles just got down, touched his toes. Remember, he's only 5, so give him some credit here. All right. He just touched his toes, and then he got back in his chair like a good boy. All right. And the mom says, that's fine, I said heartily. What's she talking about? What he did, his touching of the toes. And remember, this is like an older passage. So imagine she was saying, well done, like it was some miraculous feat that he could touch his toes. Well done, I said heartily. What is that telling you about the mom in terms of how she feels and thinks? What kind of mom is she to Lori, the son, who just touched his toes? Well done. That's fine. I'm jotting down that's fine. But what does it tell you? Remember, use your thinking voice. What does this tell you? Well, she's a good mom. She's praising him. Yeah. She's complimenting him. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to put compliment. Okay. Praise. And again, put that in parentheses because that's my thinking voice. You see what we're doing? Authors give you details. They sprinkle them throughout the whole text, and you got to collect them. And each detail you learn along the tracking, each detail you learn tells you just a little more about the character because authors are developing the character across the text. So far, we've learned that authors tell you what characters do, actions, and say. But I want to give you a second one. In the same lesson, I want to tell you that authors also tell you what characters think. Yeah. Now, this is probably the least used type of detail, type of clue. Authors mostly develop characters by actions and spoken words. But you can learn a lot about a character based on what's on the inside, what they think, what they feel. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what I mean by think. And remember, this isn't going to be quotes. See, it's easy to figure out a lot of times. It's easy to figure out what a character said because it has quote marks around it, okay? And the character's name right before or after it. A lot of times it's easy to find out what a character did because there's a verb, an action verb a lot of times right next to the character's name. Climbed, ran, walked, fell, all right? But how a character thinks is sometimes disguised with synonyms. It might actually say, he thought to himself, and then whatever comes next, you want to write down because that was a thought. But sometimes it'll say, it won't use a word like think or thought. It'll say he pondered. He wondered. He talked to himself. That idea of like mentally talking to himself. He didn't like literally talk to himself, but mentally. Some people call it thought shots. Sometimes an author will put this in italics so that you know he isn't speaking this out loud. He's speaking this in his head. They don't all do that. But just that notion that he thought it, he wondered it, he pondered it. And not just that, sometimes their thoughts, characters' thoughts will be more like hopes, wishes, or wants. And then Lori wanted to, and then Charles wished he could. And then she dreamed, she hoped. Hey, wishes, wants, those are all different ways that we think about a text, or a character thinks about a situation. So we want to be conscious of what do we mean by a thinking detail from a character. Okay, so now when I look at these kinds of details, I don't want to mix up, and I know I kind of just barely started to mix it up myself. What we're talking about is actual details, green, in the reading that the author gives us. And the detail he gives us is by telling us something the character thought, or felt, or wondered, or wanted. It was something on the inside that they never actually voiced. It was an actual detail the author stated. That's why it's green. These thinking details, these wondering details, these feeling details are all actually stated in the text. The author comes right out and tells us. Okay? Now, I don't want you to confuse this with when you think about those thoughts, all right? The thought was actually stated. So what does that tell you about the character? What are you starting to understand about the character? So your thinking voice wonders about the character's thoughts. Do you see that difference? Okay, that's why it's good that we have two signs going on here. All right, I'm going to go back to the mom and some of those excerpts. Let me grab my clipboard. Okay, so this was like middle of the story when she's getting ready to go to the parent-teacher conference. Okay, and she says Monday night was the meeting, but her baby had a cold and it kept her from going. Now I'm in the red. I wanted passionately to meet Charles's mother. Okay, I wanted she didn't say that. She did. There's no quotes. It didn't narrate that she said it, and there are no quotes. Okay, and she's not doing anything physically. She just wants something. It's a wish or a want. What does she want? What are we learning the mom wants? She wants to meet this mother. She passionately wants. So now I can say think. Okay, so we have things she does, things she says, and thought she has. She thought, she thinks, passionately wants to meet the mother. What does that tell you? Passionately wants is the reading voice, but what does that tell you about? She is desperate. She's like, who is this kid's mother? I gotta find out. Yeah, she's desperate, passionately. So I'm writing desperate and putting it in parentheses. Okay, let's do another chunk. This one comes in the last section of the text, right at the end of the story. Okay, she's at the meeting. She sat restlessly. I already have that due. Sat restlessly, scanning for the different faces, trying to find Charles' mother, trying to determine which one hid the secret of Charles. She's trying to determine, hey, you guys, that's a synonym for she's thinking. She's looking, she's scanning, she's trying to figure it out. She's trying to determine. That's code for she's thinking. Which one hid the secret of Charles? So you wanna jot that down. I know what she's thinking. The author told me what she's thinking. So I write down, I have this is it, not a do, it's not a say, it's a think. And what is she thinking? She's thinking in terms of determining who is the mom. All right, she's trying to figure it out. I'm going to put that in parentheses. Determine is a little vague, but my thinking voice is saying she's trying to figure it out. Figure out who is this kid's mom. And so that was all based on a thought. Do you see what we're doing? This idea that authors give us clues. They give us different kinds of clues about characters. 3 kinds of clues. As readers, we got to collect them all, from the beginning to the end of the text. And when we do that, we are tracking the details. We're picking up all of the clues the author left us as he was developing, creating the character. Okay, if you were in Mrs. Smecken's class, here's what I would have you do next. I would have you reread the story, Charles. Again, yes, but this time I want you to track all of the details about Lori. Okay, you did the mom and you only did the action of the mom. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to collect all of the details about Lori. And remember, there's 5 different chunks, same 5 chunks. Okay, but now you're thinking, you're grabbing details only about Lori. What Lori did, said, and thought. Did, said, and thought. Only what Lori did, said, and thought throughout the whole text. So I'll give you the text again, and I'll also give you my version for the mom, what the mom did, said, and thought as an example, just so you can see how I wrote it, how much I wrote. But I'm looking for you to gather and really collect all the details the author gives us, all of the clues that he uses to develop the character Lori. If you were in Mrs. Smecken's class, that's what we'd be doing, but your teacher might have a better idea.